Hi there, you're listening to Meaningless. This is a podcast that just asks the question, what does man gain from his labor at which he toils under the sun? I'm Tim. People here know me as Pastor Walsh. I'm the pastor here at Grace of God Lutheran. I'll let my co-host introduce himself.
My name's Ian Macmillan. I guess I could say I was a Lutheran since I was a kid. I was baptized, I was confirmed in a Lutheran church. And, just kind of went through the motions like everybody else, was confirmed, kind of stopped going after that, and went out and lived in the world, Kind of funny that we're talking about Ecclesiastes because, I was thinking this is kind of my experience. I was thinking, going out into the world and getting knowledge and experience and everything would give me an understanding of what is my purpose, what is the nature of, the human condition, of reality, kind of try to make sense of everything. So I came to the same conclusion that it was meaningless. And, incidentally at the same time, and this is kind of how beautiful how God works, I had, I guess, for lack of a better word, I would say a regenerative experience where I was called back, almost instantaneous. It was so kind of bewildering how it happened. Then I've been back here at Grace of God for a couple months. God had been preparing me to kind of hit the ground running, so to speak. Had been reading Luther. I had loved Luther for a long time. I went back to reading scriptures, was interested, but I would just say that, I didn't do anything. I always did the wrong thing. I always, thought I was doing it myself. And I guess ultimately now I realize I was putting myself in the God spot where God should be in my life and trying to do it myself.
And that is really, as Ian referenced, we're going to start walking through Ecclesiastes. It's where we get the name for this podcast. And we intend eventually to be going on to different portions of Scripture, different doctrines in particular. But Ecclesiastes, this book that we're going to start off reading, and we want to look at chapter 1 with you all today, talks about what happens when, like you were saying, Ian, we put something else in God's place in our lives, when we're trying to find meaning and purpose and value and lasting worth in something that isn't God or isn't what God tells us is going to last. What did you pick, Ian? One thing that you can expect us to be doing as we're doing this is picking out a key passage, just something that summarizes whatever doctrine we want to look at, whatever portion of Scripture we're in.
So you're thinking about just one or the whole thing in general?
In Ecclesiastes 1 in particular,
okay.
Do you have a verse or a pair of verses?
I got plenty. There was so much good things here. I kind of went piece by piece and looked at, just kind of really look at each different part. But the one that stood out to me when I first read it, because when I first read it, I read it like a story or like a book. I just read through it like you would a novel. So I didn't sit and let's look at this passage. What does this mean? And think about it. And it's right at the end. We have 18, which is, this is the NIV version. For which much wisdom comes, much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more the grief. Right? So again, this is kind of what I came to. The understanding was that, the knowledge, your level of wisdom and your level of understanding, the more it increases, it also increases the understanding of suffering, I think, in the world and in our everyday lives. And, in a sense here too, absolutely, the meaninglessness of it, right? So we're always trying to gain wisdom, whether it's, through studying, whether it's through listening to somebody or, being taught. Now today, especially in the modern world, you have, so many kind of gurus and influencers online. And I don't mean guru just in a religious sense, there is that, but, kind of these, it's really just idols, in a sense that people worship these people and they're telling them what to do, to find the meaning in your life. Well, we have the Bible in front of us. It's pretty simple. It's right there. If we just look at that, I think we get all the meaning that we need to understand.
That's what we're hoping this podcast is, where you've got us just as two Christians, not any particular specialists or really highly educated guys, but we got one pastor, one layman, just a couple of guys who love the Bible, and we want to let you in on the conversations that we have about the Bible, about God's Word, and about the clarity that it gives us for life, how we can approach life and think about what we do and what we say with the lens that the Bible provides us. Ian, you pointed out that one passage toward the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 1, or at the end, I suppose, verse 18, with much wisdom, sorrow, the more knowledge, the more grief. Along with that one, I think of just a little bit before that, verse 15, what is twisted cannot be straightened, what is lacking cannot be counted.
I like that one too, yeah.
Yeah, it's the more you look at the world. Before you started attending here, Ian, we did a Bible study Sunday mornings, as we usually do here at Grace of God, on Ecclesiastes. And when we hit that verse in our opening, this is chapter 1, introductory discussion of this book of the Bible, I asked the question, here's how I asked the question, is there a cost of living problem on Long Island? And everybody, of course, was like, yeah, of course. And if you're a listener who's not on Long Island, just take our word for it. Like, it's real expensive to live here.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's real tough for people.
I think we pay like $13,000 or something in property taxes a year. So
it's nuts. And monthly to try and pay rent, to do anything. If you want to make rent, buy groceries, and go out to dinner once a month, maybe.
Yeah,
that's a hopeful thing.
Yeah. Some people just don't eat at home, and then they go out all the time. And so that's another way.
The thing that I asked was, right, so okay, maybe we can say that what we see around us is twisted, that there's no, but how do you straighten it? Do you encourage more development? That comes with its own issues. We're dealing with the fact that our water table here, the aquifer, for instance, is already pretty strained. Can you build up on that? Then the water prices are going to go up, and that becomes the strained resource.
Yeah, and well, if you notice here, and I grew up here. I grew up in Deer Park, which is the next town over. I grew up here, so it's definitely a radical change, and it's becoming more and more built up. I lived in New York City for a while. It basically reminds me of when I lived in Queens in some places. High congestion, high prices. The next town over, where the train station is, they're building up all these apartment buildings, low-income housing, stuff like that. So it's really becoming like the city. Now people are driving mopeds. I never saw that in my entire life,
Yeah.
So it's just that kind of...
How do you solve problems like that is a question that the book of Ecclesiastes asks. When you see that things are twisted and not working, sometimes we wrestle with, I won't even say a feeling, a recognition of the fact we can't sort it out all by ourselves.
Absolutely.
And that can lead to the feelings of meaninglessness, of hopelessness. Like, what can I possibly do?
Yeah.
Why don't we read Ecclesiastes chapter 1?
Okay.
And I know we're already
just,
a little
real quick before that, I just wanted to make a comment on there, and this is kind of what I was saying in the car over here. We have this passage, what is twisted cannot be straightened, what is lacking cannot be counted. And I was just thinking, the answer to that is, like you said, God. God gives it to us. So I kind of just was thinking, what God uses what is crooked, what is twisted, what is broken, right, in the world, especially human beings, to draw a straight line, to achieve His purposes. So that the thing that cannot be counted can be counted. Only God can do that.
Yep.
And we could probably go into this later, since I think part of this will lead into the idea of vocation and what our purpose is, our God-created purpose in creation, to relationship with God, relationship with ourselves, the other, that other just being, the neighbor, which is, man and woman, or, people as friends, as family, even as a stranger. What's our responsibilities there?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'll do it. I'm going to read. So, friends, if you're listening, we're going to read Ecclesiastes chapter 1 right now. I'm reading out of the New International Version translation. Feel free to read whatever you've got at home there. But if you're wanting to know, hey, why is it maybe slightly different as it comes across from what Pastor's reading than what I'm reading here, just know that's the explanation. I'm reading the NIV. Maybe you've got a different English Bible translation. Ecclesiastes chapter 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What does man gain from all his labor at which he toils under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, "Look, this is something new"? It was here already, long ago, it was here before our time. There is no remembrance of men of old, and even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I devoted myself to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under heaven. What a heavy burden God has laid on men. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is twisted cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I thought to myself, look, I have grown and increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this, too, is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. That's Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Ian, anything that you're thinking about right away?
Oh, yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Like I said before, when I looked at this over the past few days, I kind of tried to break down everything into like little chunks. So I got my impressions. But the first thing that I noticed that was really important is that I, always go, when I'm studying the Bible, I always go to like the original source language, whether it's Hebrew or Greek. In this case, you have both. So I like to kind of compare, like, okay, how they translated into the Greek, because then it kind of maybe gives you insight into the English a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I have my Bible that I've kept since confirmation. My confirmation Bible is NRSV, so it's translated differently here. So here it's translated meaningless.
Yeah.
But there it's translated vanity. Vanity. Yeah. So vanity is another thing, but I think they both kind of get the message across, but in a different way.
What is vanity? Like, how would you define that?
I would kind of say like vanity is kind of like a hollow glorification of the self.
Surface level only.
Yeah, shallow, extremely shallow.
Glory that's only on the surface.
Yeah, so like you look rich, you look successful, you look beautiful, you look attractive. I think vanity in our culture today is mostly obsessed with like looks, sex appeal, stuff like that.
Yep.
Like big mansion. Think of like Trump's apartment in Trump Tower. It's all like diamonds and gold-plated everything, and he looks like a rap star or something. Like a mansion. Yeah, like something like that. You know what I mean? Like that's a good example of vanity.
Yeah.
Right. There's no substance.
Yeah. There's nothing underneath a surface level appearance.
Yeah. But I think that's good because, like we were talking about before again, when you look at the Hebrew, it gives you that meaning. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The idea of, how do you pronounce it again?
Hevel.
There we go.
Is the word that we've got here, which is translated, depending on your Bible, meaningless. As Ian pointed out, some Bibles translate it vanity. There's occasions where it's translated something like vapor or breath.
Yeah.
And
which is, I think, the vapor or breath from my thing, and I'm not a Hebrew scholar by any means. I just looked this up on my own. Yeah, so I think, it kind of, the breath or, something like that is vapor is way too literal. So, I think what you want to focus on more, though, is this kind of like empty, meaningless thing, right?
Yeah, if I can draw out. So let me talk quick about who wrote this. Again, assuming that there's probably some people here listening to this who are more familiar with the Bible, maybe even with the book of Ecclesiastes in particular. But if you're not, Ecclesiastes is written, although he never explicitly states that he's the one writing it, when he introduces himself there, and what I read at the beginning, chapter 1, verse 1, the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. This is a man named King Solomon, who was King David in ancient Israel, King David's successor. And Solomon, we're told in various ways throughout Scripture, very pointedly, was this incredibly wise man. He was offered the gift of, basically, God came to him like a genie out of Aladdin one night in a dream and said, you know what, I'm going to grant you one wish, is pretty much what God said. Ask me for anything you want. Great riches, fabulous success in other areas, whatever it might be. And Solomon just says, Lord, make me wise. And that's the request that God grants. And along with that, Solomon becomes incredibly wealthy and incredibly powerful. He rules over the kingdom of Israel in ancient days at its peak, at its most influential and important and wealthy. He writes about, in this book, which is the third of the 3 books of the Bible that we usually credit him with. Solomon we credit with having written and collected the book of Proverbs. We credit him with the book called Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, and with this book, Ecclesiastes. And generally, we assume that he writes this toward the end of his life, kind of looking back on his legacy and how his whole life had played out. And he sees that a lot of, unfortunately, what he went and did with the wisdom God gave him was very unwise. He had wasted a lot of his time in compiling and storing up riches and treasures and indulging himself in all kinds of pleasures. And he was able to do that because he was so wise, but really, in a way, he practiced it very unwisely. He, as Ian was just talking about, uses this word right at the beginning then to describe overall kind of life as he had lived it up to this point, meaningless. And it's this word, hevel. It's a, we can translate it as something like breath or vapor. And that, as you pointed out, Ian, is maybe too literal. It's hard to think about. If we take ourselves back to the beginning of the Bible, the early chapters of Genesis, we're told that at the very beginning, God breathes life into human beings after making Adam, that he forms Adam out of the dirt of the ground and then breathes into him the breath of life. And there's a word there in Hebrew for the breath. It's ruach, which is the word for like spirit or wind. This is a different word. It's the word hevel. And I'm thinking about, there's a difference then between sort of the breath that God puts into us, the capacity for life that God can grant versus what we can produce on our own. Right. Solomon basically says, what I can do is just very wimpy little this vapor, right? He can barely fog up a mirror. But yeah, if you think about maybe World War I battlefields, sometimes they'd find a soldier and they'd be like, oh, is he still alive or not? And they'd put the little mirror right over his mouth.
Yeah, to see if there would be any kind of condensation, right?
Yeah, and he's just barely producing enough breath that, there's some condensation there. And that, Solomon says, is what his life has been, as opposed to like obvious, breathing, like true life. It's an interesting word.
Yeah, and I see this kind of connect later in the passage where it says, the wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. So when I think of what is breath? What is the wind? It's something that is like temporal, that is fleeting, right? It's always moving. It doesn't stay in its place, but it also at the same time, it never has a destination. Right, so like when the wind blows north, it blows the other wind south, right? So it's this constant circle that goes around, that
idea is really key to this first part of Ecclesiastes, where it's the wind blows around and around, right? The wind comes by one day and then it comes by the next day, and streams flow down into the sea, and the sun comes up and the sun goes down, and the sun comes up and the sun goes down. And that's meant to, all these descriptions of the natural world, they're meant to make us think about our own lives.
Right.
For me, I would say, when I read this, I hear a lot that as a pastor, sometimes it just feels like week in, week out, there's nothing really new, right?
Yeah.
Write a sermon, lead worship, lead some Bible studies, meet with some people, make sure you make some phone calls, talk to people, and it just feels like the same thing after the same thing after the same thing sometimes, and I that's often how our life feels, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the times we don't realize that, even though you may feel that way, that it's kind of repetitive. I don't think that, I don't necessarily think about that, not that it's just repetitive doing the same old thing over and over again, but, is there really that much else to do? Because when we think about where we are in our life, what position we're in dictates what we can do, what we can't do, what we should be doing. If you want to use the word vocation again, like we did before, that really gives you more of the understanding. So those kind of activities are kind of essential to being a pastor.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to be a pastor, if you don't want to do those things, don't be a pastor. You know what
absolutely.
I mean? But sometimes I think that we don't have control over where we're put. I think God just places us in the right place, and that's ultimately, I think, kind of what the conclusion here is that we have to rely on God.
Yeah. Can you draw out that word vocation? Because you've used it a couple times. First time you used it was a little earlier in the podcast just now. So what do you mean by that? Because it's a concept that I'll say we talk about a lot here as a church. It's a concept that's very rooted in Lutheran theology in particular, and it's biblical, I should say too. But just the way that you'll hear, as Ian just was speaking about it, that you'll hear Lutherans talk about it, is distinct sometimes from how other Christians might talk about related topics. Draw out that word, vocation.
So for a simple comparison, I guess, in the Roman Catholic, basically vocation is like being called to be like a priest or a monk or something like that. That's traditionally what it was around Luther's time.
To have a vocation was to be a church worker.
Yeah. But now Luther, and this kind of goes in with Luther's thing, right? Luther left the monastery and went out in the world. So, of course, logically, I guess, it would follow that vocation turned into the same thing. It stopped being, something for the exclusive, the elite, kind of class of the monks and those people in the church, and it was put out to the regular people like me, me and you, whether you're a pastor or a layman. And basically, it's just the role that we're given in our life, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like your job, because it does mean job, but I forget the German word that Luther uses, but he talks more like station.
Yes.
What's your station in life? So for me, say I'm a son, I'm a cousin, I'm a friend, I'm a parishioner, I'm a co-worker, I'm the guy walking on the street. These are all different vocations that we have. And it could be even the most basic thing, and it just shows that we have a created purpose, right? It's not all actually meaningless.
Yeah, the way that I like to think about vocation, because thanks Ian for that.
Sure.
Anywhere my life intersects with someone else's, there is some kind of vocational relationship usually. I'm called to be that person's neighbor in some particular way. And when Christians talk about being neighbors to others, to be a good neighbor, like if you think about the parable of the Good Samaritan, right? That's always involved with, my action toward, with someone else. What do I owe them? How can I help them? How can my gifts be used to be of benefit to them? And one thing I'd point out about that, right? Lutherans, in other words, really focus on the idea that we all sort of have a calling to love our neighbors. I don't necessarily have the calling to worry about my neighbors loving me. If we all do it, we're all good, right? If everyone's perfectly loving their neighbors, then I don't have to worry about what everyone else is doing. I just do my thing because everyone else who interacts with me is perfectly loving me. I get everything I need. That's God's ideal. He wants us living that way. He wants all people perfectly loving one another. And the Bible, in various other places, talks about in right? When you get down from just this very big concept idea, love, it talks about how should I love this particular person whom I'm interacting with in this particular situation, and that's where we get this word vocation. Like, I'm called, as a Christian, I am called to love Ian, who's sitting across the table from me here as we're recording.
That guy?
That guy.
Tough job,
but
man.
What should I do? Well, let's think about the relationships that Ian and I have, the different ways, the different axes that we interact on. I would say we're friends. We are both Christians. We're both citizens of New York. I'm his pastor and he's a member of the church. And there are ways in which, when I go into the Bible, all of these axes of relationship are spoken about in particular duties and obligations and things I ought to be doing that are love toward Ian.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point there when you talked about loving the neighbor, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. Like, if you want to think of it as a chart that comes out, like the roots of a tree that come out from the top. The root is our created purpose is to be created for the other, right? To be a companion, to love the other. So we're constantly dependent on other people. Now, that doesn't literally just mean Adam and Eve, man and woman. That's one thing, but it represents, everybody. That's, all humans. So this is our ultimate thing would be, right, our created purpose, and then everything else would kind of branch out from there. What are all our other roles, positions in life? And remember, it can be something even that happens once in a lifetime. It could be something that happens every day. Like when you go to the supermarket and you're at the register, like how do you interact with the person in front of you? What's your duty there? Yeah. If there's a problem, if somebody needs help, like you mentioned the Good Samaritan.
Exactly.
Do you walk past them or do you stop and help them?
Right.
These are all kind of things that are part of our vocation.
Yeah, there might be. And that's really something that the parable of the Good Samaritan points out, right? When I think about the word vocation, I'm usually thinking about what are the normal, everyday things that my life includes. Who are the people that for sure I know I'm going to interact with. Today I knew when I woke up, my wife and my kids would be in the same house with me, so I was going to be operating in the vocation of husband and father, that I would be doing some preparation for Sunday worship, so I'd need to be engaged in the vocation of pastor of this congregation. Maybe not in some particular ways with other people, but preparing to serve those other people in Sunday worship, finishing up preparations for worship. Ian and I were going to sit down and record this episode, and so I would have that. Let's say that an emergency presents itself. For instance, people who go to our church know that there's often people pulling over in our parking lot with flat tires and things.
Yeah, right.
I would say one of the aspects of being a good neighbor, of loving others, is for me, even though it's not, is it really something that I would call vocational? Maybe not, but if I see somebody has pulled into our church parking lot with a flat tire, I pop out and I say, hey, any way I can help out? Maybe here's a water bottle if you're just waiting on the tow truck or if you're trying to change the tire yourself. This is what God tells us loving our neighbor is. It's these acts of care in the face of others' needs, whether those are sort of emergency needs or just everyday needs. We show love to others.
Yeah, I like that. So I was kind of looking at something else. I don't mean to jump on to the next topic immediately,
that's
but
good.
I feel that was a good encapsulation of kind of what we wanted to do. When we look at the next passage in Ecclesiastes 1, we have 3 and 4, which is, what does man gain from all his labor, at which he toils under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. So when I was looking at some of my notes on this, trying to actually come up with some of the notes, I was thinking okay, generations come and generations go. Man toils all the time. What are some of these things that are trying to be, expressed here, which is really not just the cyclical nature of creation that we see with the wind and the streams, right? The streams from the sea, but the sea is never full. The winds are always blowing. But just even in human beings, right? So I came up with this kind of little pattern, like you think of like, okay, so the human life, and this actually kind of goes to every day, is, life, right? We're born, we're active, right? So our youth, we're going around, we're doing things, we're building things, we're, going around all over the place. And then our rest, right? Our old age, when we can't we're not as active as we used to be, right? We're kind of in our retirement, if you want to say that. And then death, ultimately. And, even intangible things, and this is one thing about the wind that's so important here with, attaching to the avail.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Good enough.
To avail.
Neither of us actually speak Hebrew, so.
Yeah. So like that whole idea of breath, right? It's completely intangible. It's transient. And then, but we share that same thing with the wind and the ocean and stuff like that. They remain, but our bodies turn to dust. But at the same time, we keep that kind of cycle. So, we're born, the next generation is born, our parents die, we die, the next generation is born after that one. So it's always this constant cycle that is being repeated here. But then what do you think about, like, what are the basic things that we ask for, right? We need, our needs, our desires, like food, shelter, safety, I think would be like
and we need those things. That, I like, if I can run with that.
Yeah.
It can be wearying, and that's what Solomon's pointing out. When you wake up and you're like, same. So when I was in college, I worked at a group home.
Okay.
Mentally disabled, mentally handicapped adults.
Yep.
And it was often the same thing, day by day, right? But you just had to work with that. And I had a coworker once. We were supposed to write up logs, records of everything that happened during our shift when we punched out with you had four men in this house, all of whom had these different mental handicaps, disabilities, etc. And you just were supposed to write up kind of a summary. This guy did this today and it was good. This guy talked on the phone with his parents. We went out for a drive, and this guy, just record anything. And my coworker once, I clocked in the next day and I was looking at his summaries and I said, what is this that you wrote? SSDD. And he told me it was same stuff. The word he used wasn't stuff. Same stuff, different day.
Yeah.
And I get it, right? Like I was saying earlier, it can be tiring when it feels like everything's the same old. But Ian, I like that you just pointed out, my needs are always the same too.
Yeah.
Why would I think that I'm going to get a whole lot of variety in the way that, because through our labors, our needs are met, right?
Yeah.
We hopefully earn enough to put a roof over our heads and feed ourselves and take care of those kinds of needs.
Yeah, it's kind of the scene, right? Like we have to do that to get our needs.
And not to go too deep into Ecclesiastes later in the book already, but that's later on, it's basically the message. Just recognize, this is what life is. It is going to be a lot of the same old.
Yeah.
And recognize that and roll with it.
Yeah.
Rejoice in it. Wake up every day and love the people who God has placed into your life who were there yesterday and are going to be there tomorrow. Like, what a blessing. How often don't you hear, right, when maybe mom, dad dies, the kids say things like, I wish I had gone to visit them that one time last spring when they invited me to come for a week, and I just said, oh no, work was too busy. I wish I'd gone, and I wish I'd stayed. Do those things, right? Because
if you did it, you wouldn't have to complain or regret it later.
Yeah.
And then if you did it and it didn't work out, you're going to regret it anyway. So might as well. You got to get it done,
Yeah. Don't take the sameness for granted. It's actually a blessing.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
I think so. And I think, just to kind of add on to that a little, like there is kind of a second tier to that, because you think of like food, shelter, safety as like, and I would think companionship too as well, fellowship with other people, is like a need as opposed to a desire. Mm-hmm. So then I kind of separated it here where it's like you have money, status, pleasure, all that kind of stuff, power. Those are all the desires. Those are unnecessary, right? They are part of the world. It's funny because they are kind of like, I want to say like necessary part of the world, like in quotes right there.
In a sense.
But these are the truly meaningless things.
Because they don't last.
Well, yeah, and that's what it says. It's dust in your mouth. It's chasing after the wind, right? Like he says, that's what it is. It's just It's nothing. It's temporal. So like it's always going to fade. And this is why I think it's good to understand that meaningless in the beginning doesn't just mean meaningless. It can mean vanity. And I think that's a good way because, again, the word vanity in our culture now is, usually physical appearance, right? Like sex appeal or being attractive or, fancy clothes, fancy house, fancy car, living like a Hollywood star or like a rapper or something like that, right? But these things are they're dust. They're nothing because I was thinking, even crazy, like how like this whole generational thing of how like we even forget or how we don't even know of people that used to exist, right? And he kind of goes to this later in part 11, there is no remembrance of men of old. And even those who are yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow. So,
he speaks so confidently there.
Yeah.
Like, I know this, it's the future.
Yeah.
How does he get to speak so confidently? This is wisdom. He's arrived at a true conclusion.
If you want like a good example of that, just for like, if you're into music, you'd say like, maybe people now think that like Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach or like Vivaldi or somebody was like, the greatest classical, composer in all history, two of them. And, if you know the history of Bach, he was relatively unknown until like the late 19th century. So the fact that he's like considered like the quote unquote small g god of classical music, especially the Baroque period, like nobody even knew about this guy.
Yeah.
So to think like he wasn't remembered till later, I mean, you think about like Van Gogh or Edgar Allan Poe who were, hated in their lifetime, but, 100 years later or so, they were the most famous writers. So this kind of goes into the remembrance. What is the point of, struggling for all these things in vain? Because that's what it is. It's vain. It's nothing. And that's where the vocational meaning comes into doing everything.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing it in Christ, in love for the neighbor and the other, it becomes worship to God. So you don't have to always think of it like, I have to go to church and do these things. Yeah, you got to go to church. You got to do the sacraments. It's absolutely important. But you realize that when you go out there, we're called to go out into the world and deal with people, not sit in a room and read or isolate ourselves. Monks. Yeah, and this is another, the social media monk. That's what it is now too, right? Like you're stuck online. You may be in a group with Christians or your other groups or whatever.
Social media monk, yeah.
So like you're just kind of hiding in that monastery there and not out engaging with the world, which is what Christians, or at least, I believe as a Lutheran, is what we're absolutely called to do. We got to go there. We got to get dirty. We got to go out there in the world and, suffer with other people. We got to serve other people. And it's not easy. I mean, it's easier for me to say that than to do it. So
it is. That's an important one. Can I say, because we're getting to the end of the time that we've talked about allotting for these conversations, listeners. So Ian and I are going to try and turn it around to just some general takeaway thoughts as we've read through the scriptures here, what we've discussed. That is, Ian, you just said, not being the social media monk, the person who walls himself off from vocation and from neighbor, right? Easier said than done. Everything that the Bible tells us to do is easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's why we pray.
Yeah, we pray and we ask God for strength. And we recognize we haven't done it, we don't do it, we won't do it, not to the extent that we are called to do. And so it's not in really Ecclesiastes 1 here, but we come around to the what we call the principal doctrine of the Bible, the gospel. The good news that God, despite our sin, our failure to do what we ought to do day by day in our various callings and vocations, despite that, God loved us such that he would send his son Jesus to die for us, to perfectly live his own vocations. Jesus was the perfect son to his parents and the perfect friend to his friends and the perfect teacher to those who learned from him. Right? In every way that he was called to interact with neighbors, he did so perfectly. And God credits that perfection of Jesus to you and to me over our own imperfect lives of responsibilities that are shirked and duties that are neglected, God looks at us and sees Jesus, perfect fulfillment of all those things, solely because of his love for us, what we call his grace. Mm-hmm. Important takeaway to make sure that we always walk away thinking about God's promises to us in the gospel. Any other takeaways that you think of, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of stay on that thread. I mean, like, you know, I understand because I was the same way. I was like that. I would like kind of shut myself off from everybody and kind of just do my own thing. And then you're making these artificial things, you know, whether it's a group online or, you know, I mean, that's the big kind of poison right now is being addicted to social media, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or, you know, whatever thing you use. These are all different things. Different arenas, if you want to put it like that. It's kind of like a blood sport where you're always like kind of attacking each other and going at it. But what does that accomplish? I mean, you know, this goes into one thing that I always love is the theology of the glory versus theology of the cross. And this is like that's like a whole series.
I was going to say, we'll certainly that distinction, what is a theology of glory, what is a theology of the cross, listener, you can expect that that's something we will pour into in future episodes. But really quick, what do you mean by that?
Basically what I'm just trying to say is that when you're in those situations, you're not doing it, even especially as a Christian. Like before I started coming back to church, I considered myself a Christian, but you know, now after my experience, I realized that like I was a cultural Christian. Like I called myself a Christian, but I really wasn't one. And I see this a lot where, you know, people want to constantly be attacking and, you know, winning the argument and stuff. And that's like the theology of the glory. You're making an argument to defend God, but you're not defending God, you're defending your own ego. So, you know, what the theology of the cross kind of says is that you have to die. Like you have to die to the old self so that you could be born as, in this case, the new Ian, right? So the old Adam is, you know, drowned, and then we have the new one. So, like, it's hard to do, but, like, I think the best thing you could do is just stop all those things. Like, I know it's easy, but just like if you're trapped in that kind of thing, just take it off your phone. Like what I did, I noticed sometimes, you know, I would start scrolling randomly. Like I'd go outside or I'd sit down and I'd start looking at my phone. Just take it off your phone.
Yeah.
Leave it on your computer so that you have to go to the computer and turn it on, you know, and it's something that you have to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to dedicate the time to it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's easier.
It can't be part of your
and then
walking around life.
Absolutely. And then what do? You know, I mean, I want to say go to church. I mean, that's the best thing you can do.
Yeah.
If you're interested in Christianity, do the research. You know, find something that appeals to you, preferably Lutheran. You know, I wouldn't recommend anything else. I think I'm kind of biased, but you know, that's the place to go. And you don't have to like say, oh, I'm only going to go to this one church. You can look. And, you know, I think if you pray on it, God will lead you where you need to be. Because I truly believe in the divine monergism stuff, not just because I'm a Lutheran, but that was my experience. God did everything for me. Like, and there's even parts of my life now I realize that I'm trying to control it still. So, you know, you gotta die. I know it sounds brutal, but it just means you have to surrender to it.
Yeah. This is what you were saying, right? Just day by day, letting the old nature in us, the old habits and thoughts, be drowned. That's what, again, Martin Luther, the guy who sort of spurred the movement that eventually coalesced as the Lutheran Church, he said that's what our baptisms mean, right? If you're baptized, it's not just this thing that happened once when you were a kid or when you were, however old you were, if you are baptized. And it's definitely not something that you sort of need to repeat the ritual of, right? In terms of, oh, I was baptized as a baby, but I didn't really mean that, so let me get baptized again. Well, that's not what God tells us baptism actually is. It's His promise that you have died to those things and that He has risen you to new life. And so when, day by day, the wind is blowing, turning round and round on its course, and the streams are flowing into the sea, right? When you're waking up and facing the new day with the same challenges and opportunities and neighbors in it, it's an opportunity for you to die, and rise. That's what I think we can take away from Ecclesiastes chapter 1, friends. Thanks for listening to the Meaningless podcast, this first episode. Looking forward to continuing these conversations. I hope it's been a blessing to you. Reach out, contact us anytime. You can reach us at meaningless@graceofgod.church is the email address, meaningless@graceofgod.church. Friends, have a wonderful, blessed day. God bless you. Ian, anything you want to say?
That's it. Yeah. The Lord be with you.